The biggest common fallout and what we worry the most about donning and doffing is contaminating themselves, right? That's the biggest piece. I remember when Ebola hit back in, was it like 2014? And we were all over donning and doffing, the order to take it off, how to take it off, when to take it off.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing the industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you fight dirty every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now, turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
This week on Beyond Clean, we speak with Tamara Beam, Interim Infection Prevention Director, and we're going to be talking about facing off the gaps of face shields and mask. Bobby. And Bobby's with me today. Bobby Parker, our VP of Clinical Services at Beyond Clean. This is not your first time hosting a show, Bobby, but you're not a regular, so it's good to have you back in the studio with us today. Are you excited about this conversation?
This is going to be a good one, Hank. PPE may not be the most exciting topic out there, particularly for our supply chain folks or sterile processing managers, but I guarantee you our technicians care deeply about their PPE and decontam. So I think this is going to be a good one.
And if they don't care deeply about it yet, Bobby, by the end of this, something tells me that they will. So with that, hang tight. We'll be right back with Tamara Beam.
I'm Justin Poulin.
And I'm Hank Balch.
From 17 Studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
Joining us now is Tamara Beam, the Interim Infection Prevention Director at a hospital potentially near you. Tamara, we've known you for a while across our brands. You did a fantastic interview and episode on one of our other platforms, Transmission Control. And so your name and your face is probably not even new to Beyond Clean, but definitely you've been around the sterile processing space, educating all over the country for many years now. We're excited to bring you on Beyond Clean for an episode on face shields and masks in this season, all about PPE. So welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the offer.
Yeah. So for those who may not know you, because we do have a lot of new technicians, or maybe you just haven't made it all the way down to South New Mexico or, northern Montana, maybe you didn't make all those places yet. So for those of the audience that maybe don't know who you are, can you give us a little bit of background about and your passion, what brought you into sterile processing and what has kept you here?
So my background's pretty extensive. I started out as a registered nurse taking care of patients at bedsides in the ICU, your open heart patients and very difficult, very ill patients, and was raising a family at the time and decided to work days and fell in love with infectious disease while working with some physicians in Kansas City, and ended up interviewing for my very first role for infection prevention there in Kansas City, Missouri. Worked for a healthcare system there for 4 years. Fell in love with infection prevention. So shortly thereafter, in 2015, I moved to the East Coast and worked for another very beautiful health system there as their infection prevention manager, and enjoyed it so much so that I decided to consult for a while. And I did that not only for large organizations such as Kaiser, but large organizations not only in the United States, but outside of the United States. Enjoyed that so much so that I decided to go to the dark side and work for a vendor company. So just finished a long stint of 4 years with Steris, the largest sterilization company pretty much in the world, and recently decided to go back to doing some consulting again. So I'm back in infection prevention.
And you know a thing or two about PPE, which is why I was excited to have you on the season today. And, particularly talk about this conversation around face shields and masks, because in the audits out there for IPs, like, you guys are busting us all the time for non-compliance around face shields and masks. So I really want to get your years of insight, to weigh in here. But before we get started with the real questions, I do want to do kind of a softball warm up here for you. If you could design your own face shield and mask, what would you create? What would that look like? What gaps would that solve? How would you put something like that together?
That's a great question. And I think from an infection prevention perspective, you're always trying to think outside the box of what the next best thing is to protect people. But something that would protect somebody, their whole head and neck. Very similar protection to what nurses use in the hospital, called a PAPR, which is a powered air purifying respirator. It definitely provides some type of airflow in it as well. And it's very open concept, so you can visualize everything from side to side, so super safe. And the really nice thing about it is it also, other than the full visibility, is that it doesn't fog up because it has that constant positive purified air running through it. It's also totally waterproof, super thin. It's, it doesn't really make you sweat. And it's almost like spacesuits that they wear when they're doing a hip surgery. So I think this would be absolutely wonderful if we could introduce something such as that to sterile processing or GI world.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Tamara, I don't wear glasses, but my time in decontam has given me some empathy for my spectacled friends, right? Having the mask on and then that shield and dealing with fog and trying to work at the same time. So I'm sure that you have lit up the eyes of many sterile processing technicians and the potential bright future of PPE. But let's get started here just talking about the basics. Why are we wearing face masks and face shields in decontamination? What is the purpose of those, particularly in sterile processing or the endo environment?
So that's a really great question, because a lot of people, they know that they have to wear something because their boss told them to, but they don't know the why, right? So let's talk about the why. It's to protect them. It's to protect them, their family, their loved ones from anything that can be transmitted as infectious in the processing that they're doing. So for example, blood, body fluids, general bacteria. They just did surgery on a patient. We have no idea what they were doing surgery for, right? Was it a virus? Was it a bacteria? Do they not even know? Their normal flora may impact that person who's processing the instrumentation. So the other piece that's super important is it protects them from harmful chemicals. The chemicals they're using in GI reprocessing and SPD space are harmful. They're enzymatics. Enzymes are found in our digestive tract to break down food. So you wouldn't want an enzyme in your face or on your skin or in your eyes because it would break that part of your body down. So ultimately, it does protect you. What's interesting is that the other purpose of it is because we do have splashes, right? We have splashes and sprays and aerosolization at the sink when we're processing these items. So an article in 2021 and study done by Corey Ofsted really showed the distance and the expansiveness of the PPE that's lacking, right? So how far those splashes go, and actually thinking about, if it's a term I've always told people for years in infection prevention, and even when I was working, in the SPD and endo space directly, was if it's wet and sticky and it's not yours, you should probably be wearing PPE, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's such a good reminder that the PPE rules in your decontamination, that's not your manager's rules that they've come up with. That's not even just a best practice guideline. That's an OSHA regulation. That's not one of those best practices that might impact patient care down the line. That's there to protect you. And so super important to be wearing that PPE. And thanks for lining that out for us. I guess to follow up on that, will any old face mask and shield do? I remember reading different boxes of face masks, and there are different ratings and capabilities of them, different sizes and shapes of shields. So I guess what kinds might you see out there in the industry, and what do they need to be looking for?
So it's a really great point that you made previously as well when we talk about OSHA, because they're the ones who dictate what those face masks and shields should look like. OSHA is very specific. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which specifically was put in place to protect people, right? So when we talk about simple face masks, for example, what we've been seeing during COVID, most of those are not droplet resistant or waterproof or water resistant. So the masks you want to wear in a sterile processing or GI decon space, they should be liquid resistant. You want to make sure it says that also on the box. I've walked into many departments and I'm like, have you seen the box? It says doesn't protect you from this, and they don't know, right? They don't know what they don't know. So during COVID, we pretty much were using anything we could, which was perfectly fine. Something was better than nothing. But now that we're kind of out of that pandemic, we really need to think more about the right products. So those masks that you want to wear, sometimes you'll see them loops over your ears, some tie in the back of your head or neck. So you just need to make sure that it says something about water resistant, right? And then the face shields or eye protection you see come in a lot of different forms. For example, you have goggles, you have safety glasses. And if you've ever noticed, they kind of sit on your face and they really don't protect anything except for your eyes, right? You can get sprayed on your cheeks and your forehead and everywhere else. But when they're not protecting your entire face, you also need to think that you can't wear personal glasses either. That is not PPE, right? There's some people who are like, well, I'm wearing glasses. It's okay. No, because everything from the sink is now on your glasses. You're going to go home with those glasses. And then the face shields that you wear, there's different ones. Some slide over your head, come down to your chin. Others are a mask shield combination integrated. And all of the shields on the market seem to fog up. There's actually, believe it or not, products in the market that I just was recently introduced to in the last couple of years that actually prevent fogging, but they're used for swimmers. They're used for their masks. They're used for divers and things like that. So there's types of items that you can buy that actually are impregnated with that, but it's very interesting because we've never even considered that with PPE for SPD and the GI processing spaces.
I watch a lot of Survivor, I admit it. And on that show, they're always like giving a mask and goggles, to do water challenges. And they use the old-fashioned spit method, spit in your goggles and then you're good. So that's probably not a good practice in sterile processing. So, looking at some of those other solutions, I think it does need to happen, right? That kind of gap is evident. Everybody knows it. It's a challenge around these kind of devices. And even the world's best engineers out there, for PPE still haven't quite found the product solution for it yet. There's got to be some kind of secondary solution or chemical. So for those of y'all who are listening who, maybe you're an engineer, maybe you want to be an engineer one day, or maybe your next door neighbors with an engineer, bring this problem to them because it still needs to be solved. So speaking of gaps, what are the other gaps that you have seen out there, when you're serving in a hospital setting, when you're performing those audits on the consulting side, the common gaps and non-compliance that I referenced when we see IP come in and there's something wrong with our mask or our face shield?
Yeah, that's a good point too. People, they'll do workarounds, right? Just because they, maybe they don't want to open a new box of masks or they don't want to open a new face shield. So some of the common gaps I see, again, personal glasses, face shields not pulled down all the way. So they kind of look like they're a welder and it's kind of like sitting up halfway. So then it's not protecting pretty much any of their face at all. Or they're reusing PPE. So they feel like if they just take it off and they can reuse it again and again. And what they don't understand is single use of those items is super important to enforce because what they can do is just contaminate themselves. And they oftentimes just don't realize that they can do that. So it's definitely one of the gaps, as well as just not having the right products, right? Like I talked about the masks earlier, they might have a regular mask and it's not a mask that would protect them from fluids from splashing and getting on their face.
Yeah, that, fluid or liquid point is so critical because there's all kinds of different contexts where you may be wearing a face mask, that don't involve liquid, but that's not in the decontam space in reprocessing medical devices. We've got liquid, we got chemicals, right? It's not always just water. It's also chemicals that are around us. I remember, speaking of non-compliance of masks, in the early days of COVID, and actually probably all the way through the days of COVID, I was always so stressed out when I went out in public and I saw all the non-compliant mask wearers out there. Maybe they were trying their best, maybe they weren't, but I just looked around and saying, I don't know what you guys think you're doing, but that ain't the way that mask is going to do any good. And, that was at scale, right? But we're talking about in our setting that, hey, you can get the right kind of rated mask. It can be present. It's the right size for your face shield. You got it on. But if you're not wearing it in the way the manufacturer has created and validated to be worn, it's still not doing you any good. So I think, highlighting that, Tamara, is very important, especially for those of us who just get complacent. I've seen that welder, face shield thing that you mentioned. Oftentimes because the fog is up at the top, right? And you're just trying to see what you're doing. And so you're lifting that thing up. It just causes these scenarios of the classic Swiss cheese model of error prevention. You get enough of those holes in your PPE, literal or figurative holes.
Right.
And then you got an error that's coming. So speaking of putting these things on, doffing and donning of PPE is always a really hot topic for training, but also, again, for this auditing and compliance stage. So talk to us about what that looks like for our mask and our face shields. Is there anything in particular that SPD people need to keep in mind or that you've seen over on the endo side that's just a common fallout when it comes to getting this stuff on and off?
Yeah, the biggest common fallout and what we worry the most about donning and doffing is contaminating themselves, right? That's the biggest piece. I remember when Ebola hit back in, 2014? And we were all over donning and doffing, the order to take it off, how to take it off, a room to take it off. So when we talk specifically about the masks and the face shield, the Center for Disease Control, CDC, gives you very specific guidelines on donning and doffing. There's pictures, there's videos online, there's all these different types of ways you can learn. But when you talk about specifically your face mask and your shield, that's put on after you put on your impervious gown, right? So you put your gown on, you tie it, and at that point in time, you want to don your face mask and making sure that it fits, right? Just like you were saying, they'll wear it any way they want, not under our nose. It needs to be crimped at the bridge of our nose. It can't be hanging off of one ear, all those types of things. So get it on there, fit it snug, nice and tight. If it has a flexible bridge, definitely make sure it fits really well. And then you're going to don your goggles or your face shield at that point in time, making sure you have a proper fit. You don't want anything that's going to fall in your face, fall in the sink. And it should wrap around the side of your face. So that's the other thing you want to do, is making sure that face shield covers that side of your face. You don't want something that's literally just covering the front section, because that's definitely going to be an issue. And then when you think about taking it off, it has to be removed in an order that's going to protect the staff, right? So when they get ready to doff everything, what they would do first is, again, they remove things that are the dirty part first. So for example, your shoe covers and gloves. And then once you wash your hands after taking your gloves off, then you're going to move to your goggles and your face shield. That's going to be removed, as well as the next step is some more PPE. The mask is one of the last things you remove. So you have to remember, it's the closest thing to your face, and you want to have the cleanest opportunity at that time. So once those goggles are removed, your gown comes off, and then it's the mask, right? Grabbing the elastic ties or snaps on the side, never touching the front where your face is. You always want to grab wherever it's connected, so that way you're not contaminating your hands when you take them off. And then having a separate breakout space to do those things, right? So that you're not standing in the middle of the department, taking off all of this PPE, and then just recontaminating yourself because you're still in the department.
Yeah, that's all really great advice for donning and doffing for our users out there. But what I particularly love about it is the whys that you gave. And this is really instructive for our sterile processing managers, our endo managers, out there in teaching this, because I don't remember learning that when I was a technician, the importance of the order of donning and doffing and the reason why. Now, I probably was told why and I just don't remember, but I don't recall it. And having the why of what order we're taking our PPE off and that direct relationship to keeping contamination off your face, like that would speak to a technician and help them remember that. So yes, make your policy, your standard procedure, have your work guide with pictures on it up in that breakout room where the donning and doffing happens, but also have an in-service with a trainer and walk them through it and tell the whys that Tamara just walked through, and that's going to be more impactful, and you're probably going to get more compliance that way. So yeah, thank you for that tip. As we're talking about just user tips for how to comply with PPE, I'm thinking back to all of the kind of self-learned habits that technicians pick up. The one that comes to mind for me is wearing these 1/4 or 3/4 length face shields that go down to about your chin, and how to operate in sterile processing without having water end up like up your nose from using those sprayers, because there is a gap there. And what that ended up is this ergonomic posture of kind of turtling your head forward to try to look down at as an extreme of an angle as you could to keep that water from splashing up on your face. There's all kinds of like user tips out there. Are there any kind of user considerations that you would give to how to use this PPE well out in the field, or what masks to select and not select, or shields to pick, or any of those types of things you want to share with our audience?
I think those are great questions too, right? Because it's not like going to Costco and choosing your favorite drink, right? It's PPE, it's products, right? So being a part, making sure that there's somebody from the department on the product council. So there's usually like essential supply type product council, and that product council will, they have supplies and they're going to tell you what they have. So really look and see what works for staff, right? For example, what kind of face shield works for John may not work for Mary. Maybe Mary is really small and John is really tall. So I think that it's good to involve the staff. The frontline people who are doing the job, we need to help them be able to choose the right mechanism. The other piece that's important is call your infection preventionist. Have them come down there and work with you on donning and doffing and how to wear it properly, making sure that everybody has what they need to be safe and wear things safely. So really reviewing that process with them and working in conjunction. It's multidisciplinary. It's frontline staff, the OR, SPD manager, GI manager, infection prevention, and then central supply, just all working together to make sure they have the right products and they know how to use them correctly.
I love that. And I think, like we've talked about before on the podcast, we've written about this. If you're not invited to that product committee, invite yourself.
Absolutely. Figure
out where they're having it and just show up and say, hey, I heard you're making decisions about my department. I would like to contribute to this conversation.
Right.
And typically they don't kick you out. They're polite enough to say, okay, that's a good point. But, they do forget about us sometimes. That's just common knowledge. Like we're often got separated from those decisions many times in sterile processing. So yeah, that's a fantastic piece of advice. Not only like we're not just talking to managers out there, right? Like you don't have to be a manager to be in those meetings. You can be the educator. You can be the lead tech. You can just be a very passionate tech that wants to go and advocate, for what you need on the front line. So that's a fantastic takeaway that I really hope folks, will take back to their departments, especially if you feel like the products that you're using today are not adequately protecting you, right? Because there's been a couple of comments even in this interview of, hey, if you got this kind of shield, you may want to look at a different kind of shield, or if you got the wrong kind of mask, that's actually not what you need. And so, yeah, go back, check your inventory today. And then if you can identify these product committees or councils, start shooting off some emails or just, find out where they are and show up. I've told this story before, Tamara, and I'm going to tell it again because this is the face shield episode. The only incident that I ever had in my sterile processing career was regarding a face shield. I was in decontam and I was manual cleaning one of those liposuction cannulas, and it had a little spring-loaded button on it. And I didn't realize that. I was a new technician, and And so I'm looking down, and I wasn't doing what Bobby said. I wasn't turtling, and I was not properly angled. And so that button was underwater, and it flipped on the spring, and the water went directly up into the face shield, into my eye. And then I'm, freaking out at the eye wash station with 100 million things going through my mind. Like, what did I just do to myself? And how is this going to change my life? So, we're not just talking about compliance. We're not just talking about hypotheticals. Like, these things happen, and you do not want to go through that experience just because you were either not aware of or intentionally deciding to be non-compliant. So for whatever that story helps out there, I hope that encourages someone to do the right thing tomorrow. As we wrap here, Tamara, how do folks track you down if they got questions? Because there may be some questions on this show. And you do a lot of educating and speaking around the country too. So if folks want to kind of reach out to you and be like, hey, can you come to my next APIC or my next HSPA? How will they reach out to you and then also follow you?
Oh, that's such a kind question. They can follow me on LinkedIn. So they can friend me on LinkedIn. I'm on there under my name, Tamara Beam. I believe I also have my personal email linked to that as well as my phone number. So anytime you want to reach out to me, you can private message me or call me or text me. And it's a passion of mine to really help others to understand standards, guidelines, and safety, all the safety that has to do with whether it be sterile processing or infection prevention. So pretty passionate about that as well as endoscopy. It's pretty much my life. I eat, sleep, and breathe it, and I love to share it with others, and I love to educate. So reach out to me. I'd love to help.
I think you said at the beginning of this interview that it was a time in your life that you fell in love with infectious diseases. And I thought that was an interesting phrase. But, now that we're done with this interview, I can tell you do have a passion not only for infectious diseases, but protecting us from them. So, Tamara, thanks again for coming on the show. This is a fantastic interview. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you.
That was Tamara Beam, Interim Infection Prevention Director out there at a hospital potentially near you. Maybe be your hospital in your hometown, Bobby. Who knows? But, I hope she's in my hospital, actually, the one that's right next door to my house, because she's got the vision for what it takes to fight dirty, especially when it comes to these face masks and these face shields. So I thought that was a terrific practical conversation today.
It was. And speaking of vision, that image that she has of if she could create her own PPE and the hood that wouldn't fog up and would vent, and man, I think that would be tremendous. And the splash study that she referenced from 2021, Hank, I don't think we've seen the end of the impacts of that. I think it is just the beginning of how that's going to impact PPE for sterile processing, because the story that you shared and the splash exposure you had, I don't think that's an uncommon experience, unfortunately, in the field. And those things need to change. So I came away hopeful from the conversation.
Even the highlight that you brought up, Bobby, of the proper order and the purpose of doffing that PPE in that order. And I can't tell you how many times I have probably done it incorrectly. And I'm trying to reach around to get the strings of the mask off. And I don't even know which one, like I'm tying it like a little bow knot, and I don't know which one I'm pulling to get that tie off. And I'm probably contaminating all kinds of the back of my head, who knows? Who knows what kind of germs are back there at the end of that. So those things are important. It is practical. And as you said, I think it was very instructive for the audience today. So if you are tuning in to this episode of Beyond Clean, I want to personally thank you. And I want to encourage you, if you're not already subscribed to us, everywhere you can subscribe to podcasts, on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio, or even better, you can download our Beyond Clean mobile app on the Apple App Store or the Android App Store, Google Play. And when you do that, please give us a rating and review, 5 stars, to show the world that sterile processing is in this to win it. We're not messing around when it comes to fighting dirty, and we're going to show them through the best creative education possible out there. So do us a favor today and go make that happen on your smartphone. If you've got any ideas for a future episode or maybe a guest, hit us up. We want to know, and we want to talk to new voices out there. Track us down at info@beyondclean.net, or you can just shoot us a LinkedIn message if you're connected to anybody on the team on LinkedIn. We'd love to know and make that happen in a future season. With that, we're going to wrap it up and tell you how we always tell you, as you're out there today, keep on fighting dirty.